Hey, it's the last passive AD upset, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
Now, there is a sense, I've actually seen this fairly widespread, that even though people sort of vibed with the LEC format, changing to the 3 mini splits from the season finals, as opposed to the old system where it used to be the BO1s for like 8-9 weeks, and then it would go to like a double elim playoff eventually. Instead, we obviously have this new system now where you just start with the BO1s, eliminate 2 teams, and you have the group stage of the BO3s. You eliminate all but 4 teams. The last 4 teams go through to the playoffs, where they play at the best of 5s, which is the playoffs. There's split 1, then we have a second split, then we have a third split, and then we have the season finals. A lot of people seem to have the vibe that because they didn't like the sort of sentiment of how the season ended, they didn't like the storylines, the feel of it, how competitive it all sounded, that it's the format. The format must be the problem. And I get why people might think this, because first of all, it's a new format for them. They've never experienced it before. Secondly, I do think some of the format elements hide issues that aren't actually to do directly with the format, but I will get to some of the format issues. And then thirdly, I also get the feeling people are just doing that thing where it's like, whatever the last thing changed was, like, just change that back and everything will be the way it used to be. Whereas, like, not really. That's not really the way this works. Like, put it this way. Like, in theory, you look at some of the teams in the league and sometimes a player joins, like, Limit joins XL. Is he really the reason why XL was in the final? Nah, not really. Like, there's better players in that team. Him joining helped. It wasn't the only reason. Like, Abadagi is probably the meta is probably a bigger reason, quite frankly, and people not figuring out how to draft against them. So what I want to do first of all is let's talk about the actual issues with the format. So I would say what you have to ask yourself is, why does it suck? In what ways does it seem like it sucks? Like, as far as I can tell, the main issue people actually have is with how the format ends. So it's the fact you have the 3 splits. Now, already people have an issue with the 3 splits. Like, there used to only be 2 before, so how many is that worth? Like, are there really now 3 titles a year as opposed to 2? That seems unfair, right? To people who played back then. Or maybe they should be worth more, but we haven't ever said that. And then you do get a trophy, but at the same time, you're not the full LEC champion, because then there's the season finals. I get it. The messaging around that certainly is confused. And I wish they'd clear that up. Like, if I were them, I'd do something like either the 3 like splits are like a mini championship, and I'd say they're worth half of a normal LEC crown, or I'd have some sort of a thing where I'd like a special super bonus thing. If you get all 3 mini splits and you win the season finals, you get some sort of like golden LEC trophy. I'd have some whole way there of separating it myself, but fair enough, I get it. That part is a bit tricky, but I like having more competition. As someone who's seen them go to the BO2 era and the BO3 era of LCS and LEC. That was better than BO1. Everyone now goes, no, but it wasn't. And that's because you've mind-fucked yourself in the fact that convincing yourself to watch this next shitty BO1 between Immortals and fucking NRG is better than watching like 2 more games of a really good match. I don't know how you've convinced yourself of that, but I get it. You're in League of Legends. You've drunk the Kool-Aid. Riot has broken your brain. Best of 2 and best of 3 were much better than best of 1. Best of 2 isn't as good as best of 3. Better than fucking best of 1 though. And I will never care about watching the whole league. So I forget that part. That's not an issue. But I do think, as usual, when something good comes along, people just look at what the bad part was and ignore because they don't understand what was good. Like, it was good to have multiple splits this year. So I would say this. I think narratively is one area people didn't like it. So they didn't like the fact that the season final and then the summer split felt close together, but had a few weeks between them, but then felt like season finals was sort of a rerun of the summer split. And besides, if summer split didn't decide qualifying to Worlds, so wait, we had summer split, but then what gets you to Worlds is the season finals that you had to qualify through the set. That's what confused people. People don't understand the narrative. It doesn't make sense. So essentially, narratives being lost is an issue, right? I would say this, think of the narratives that were added by the mini splits. Like BDS having that finals run and being 1 game away from winning the split. So they basically almost won a split, a mini split, right? If that was a normal split of LEC, by the time they were in the finals there, you'd have only just like got to the playoffs. You'd have started your playoff run. So if basically you weren't actually that good as BDS weren't for like 2 months, they wouldn't have been able to have that result most likely. Like, that's probably more like one of those teams, happened many, many times before. XL did it last year. Vitality at one point in time was good. Either at the beginning of the split or the end of the split, you do a mad run and you're looking really good in the BO1s and everyone's hyped, and that just doesn't last to the playoffs. And at the end, when you come like 6th or 4th, no one remembers you could have won a split. No one remembers that. No one remembers that CLG was the best on their Dardock back in LCS. No one remembers that way, way, way back many moons ago ago, obviously SK Gaming was number one, weren't they, with Forgiven when he was by far and he wasn't dying at all, but no one cares, right? Because they came fourth in that split. No one remembers them as champions. He got the MVP, but they didn't win the split. Same with Dardoch. He had to be kicked off the team tanked, they didn't manage to win that split. No one remembers how good that was. The mini split format means if you are really good for a few weeks, you can get a little championship out of it. You can actually sort of like mark that in history. I think it's better for narratives. Now, I'd also say similarly, in same way BDS almost won, didn't this really help Mad Lions? Like, Mad Lions, if you combine spring and summer and make it so winter was the equivalent of what spring split was, and then spring and summer are the same, like, don't they just not win a split? Don't they just not win spring split? I mean, they were shit at the end of summer split. They're absolute garbage. They tanked the whole thing. Now, you can claim that, but it doesn't matter because they're already clever to ceasefire. That's irrelevant. Like, that's not the way anyone's going to remember history. No one's going to know that when they look that up. They're just going to think they weren't that good. So, Mad Lions got to win a split. Now, I would say they're the perfect example of how being a flash in the pan can actually show you, like in an open circuit, you were still good. You get a championship, but you weren't actually like one of the elite teams the whole year. That's why if you look at the whole year, there were many times this team was up and down, had real variance in their results and could lose to anyone and could beat anyone seemingly. They weren't elite at the level G2 was, even though they won a split in the middle of the finals. I think a bigger issue for me, and we'll get this out of the way before we get to like the secret sleeperies and spoilers, just the teams were shit the way they were managed. But there's one more format issue, and the format issue goes like this. I do think they made an enormous mistake messaging wise and in terms of qualification status for the season finals. In my opinion, here's what you needed to do. Right? The old system, remember, we've been through a bunch of these. So if we go way back in time, summer splits, so same as last year, just was what qualified you to Worlds, didn't it? Top three used to get you into Worlds. That's why the third place game was so important, where it was single elim. Then we had the regional thing added. So now it's like just winning gets you there. Then there's the circuit points one. Then there's the regional gauntlet one. We had that for a bunch of years. And then we went back eventually to just the summer split decides it, right? So the problem, I think, is this. People are used to summer split just being about a Worlds qualifier, basically. So in doing so, now you've added more mini splits and you've got the season finals. You've made it like, fuck, this is the season finals. Top of the dojo. The big boss will see you now. But then he doesn't, does he? Because it actually doesn't matter if you win. It's just about, do you make it to Worlds, which is the exact same battle you're doing now to also win the season. So at the same time I'm trying to win the season, I'm also trying to just get top X and qualify to Worlds. I think that's a problem right there, is that for fans and broadcast talent, you blurred the lines. I already heard the broadcast talent when people won matches where they were still alive in the season finals. So the real story there for our region domestically is you can win the equivalent of the Super Bowl or the Premier League. But instead, this is like, you could still win the Premier League, but all you're going on about is like, and by winning that match, like, they're going to be in Europe next year and then the Champions League next season. It's like, we'd still mention that they can win the season though, but that's the point. The vibe made it feel like, unless you're G2 who felt so far ahead, who really gives a fuck about season finals? It's just about getting to Worlds. If you get to Worlds, who cares? That could be a ticket to anything. I mean, in a dream world, Worlds itself, but you're not going to win the championship. But obviously, you know, make a deep run, show off your skills on the international stage. So I would just separate the two. What I would actually do is make a hard demarcation. I would have the season finals just be the finals of the season, the top 6 teams or whatever, and I would make that all about this championship. And I would make it that this is more important than any of the 2 championships in LEC past years. That's why it's the finals. This is the Super Bowl of European League of Legends. I would do that. I would finish that. And I would only make, say, like, the winner of that tournament maybe have, like, a world spot or just have more points to the season finals. I would make it a qualifier for the season finals still. But I would make all the focus for that tournament about Worlds. And then what I would do is, I would just take the winner of Summer Split and give them the number 1 seed from Europe. But let's say you don't want to do it. See what, so, sorry, not Summer Split. Let me think how you'd say this. Season finals, maybe make the season finals team number 1 seed. And then what I would do is, all the other teams just go into a little gauntlet. Remember, nowadays we sorted the gauntlets. Go look at the LPL and LCK. It only needs to be like 3-4 matches. That's it. And it can take place over 2-3 days. That's it. Do that for the last few spots. Then, so season finals is still just about winning the championship because you have to win to get your world spot. Then, you still want to go deep in it because you want to get the season final spot, but then season finals is about qualifying for, no, sorry, it's not season finals. The regional after season finals is about qualifying for Worlds, and that need only be 1 or 2 days. And if people are still playing for the season finals anyway, you're going to have practice. I think that's how you fix it. Also, then, the 3 weeks off aren't that big a deal, quite frankly. I will say that's another fuck up, is making the season finals last so many weeks. No, season finals needs to be like 2 weeks tops. I'd probably just say a week, personally. Have a couple of days, every couple of days, I'd have teams playing the best of 5s. Like, I think that would be fire. I think it'd be more or like a CS major or one of those types of international tournaments. So I would make it even less. So having that many weeks off and then that many weeks between, I mean, it meant that the season finals took with the break as well, like a month and a half. So it was too much. It was too much for how it was done. Now, a bigger problem, and this is what we're actually going to look at in this episode, because this is the real issue that people are missing, is it's actually about the teams. Here's the real thing. If I ask you what really sucked about this split, here's what sucked. It was too easy for G2. They even looked like they were playing with their food and they still could never lose. Then you had people like Mad Lions just do fuck all most of the time, then just turn it on out of nowhere and do runs. And then you had no true competition for G2. Like, Mad Lions was up there, but they weren't as good as G2, definitely not internationally. And so really it was, will G2 just win everything? Oh, Mad Lions fluked one, or it could have been BDS. And aside from that, oh well, who cares about this year? Well, notice how you didn't mention all the other contenders there. Where's Fnatic? Where's Excel? Where's Vitality? Those teams mega fucked up their rosters. And them fucking up their rosters is what made this split suck. Because here's what is awesome in esports. It's not just having a champion. It's having a potential champion, hopefully with a bunch of other potential champions and contenders, and watching them battle it out. And therefore, you actually have a lot of competition for who wins, and it pushes you to the limit. That was the opposite of what it was this split. So let's just go and look at some of the teams. You'll get a sense of why. So let's just start with the winter season. That's where the year began, remember. So you have to remember, G2, obviously they have the same roster. They didn't have to change because they kept winning all the time. But remember, this lineup could have been even better. In theory, this lineup was going to have El Yoya if Mad Lions didn't fumble the bag. So they'd have had this lineup plus El Yoya. I think they would have just won every split. I don't think any team would have been able to get anywhere close to them. I think actually, like being a rookie is one of the only chances you had to beat this team. And Cap's been a bit off his game compared to the Larsons of the world. So G2 could have been even better, but were mega anyway. Their team just worked. Then after that, remember, here are the teams people actually thought could be championship contenders. So the champions of the previous split, the reigning champions, was Koi, Rogue. Now, obviously, they got rid of Odoamne. And at the time, they still had Trinby. So it was only Odoamne who went, and he was a weak side top laner. Now, I think Odoamne is mega, but to other people, you should still have a chance to be a top team. Shigenda was certainly a good ERL player. What happened with them this split? They were fucking irrelevant. Look, they were 7th. Now, they actually made a little playoff run, thanks to Larson and going a bit ham in the groups. But, yeah. What do you want? That's it. This is the only split they had any relevance this year, was this first one. So that's Koi, reigning champions out the way. Not even relevant, this split. G2's already really good. Who was the other top teams? Fnatic was a top team the previous year. Now, this is when Fnatic got Reckless and then Rocks in as their bot lane, because Hylissang's gone to Mad Lions, and Upset at this point in time just sits out the split. So they should still be a solid team, right? Nope, they were absolute garbage. They didn't even make the group stage in this one. So, okay, there's another contender. Top 3 teams, we've only got one at the moment. Okay, Vitality's made a semi-super team, right? Sure, Neon was just like very good last split. He wasn't like a true elite player, but he had an elite split potentially. They still have Perks. You got in Bo, this super phenom from China. Photon actually ended up being way better than any thought they would be, but no one knew at this point in time to be any good. And then you have Kaiser that you kept and you hope it'll just work out. It didn't. It was terrible. But even so, they did really well in the best of ones. Then in the group stage, it was whatever. And then they just didn't end up being a team that had the ability to go to the best of 5s and win there. So there's Vitality out the equation as well. Who have we even got left at that point? Like, at this point, I'm already on Mad Lions, and Mad Lions actually was supposed to be like a 4th or 5th best team. So no wonder it's irrelevant as a fucking year narratively if they're the second best team. I mean, look at their team. Look how many inters they've got. They've got people like Chasey. No one knows if they're going to be any good. El Yoya's staying. Will he be fucked off that he had to stay in the team? Who knew? Who could possibly know if this team would be any good? And by the way, Carsey, probably the best year of Carsey's career this year. No one could know that was going to happen. If anything, Hylissang still on not that great a year, but he did start the year well. So Mad Lions is all right. They're like a solid team. They're above average. No. In this world, they're the second best roster. There's your problem right then. XL, I thought they could have been the best team. Look how amazing this looks on paper. Like Odoamne, Cersei, Fethio, Patrick. Those are all LEC level talent, by the way. Argamas, arguably all LEC. At least he looked like it from his first year. So you got Youngbuck as your coach, Nelson as assistant. This looked banger. What happened? Last place. Remember, 2 of my potential like championship teams have won 3 games out of the 18 they've played, guys. Like, this is ridiculous shit. So no wonder the split sucks. After that, who are we left with? Like BDS. Like, they actually did end up competing. There's no way they should. It looks like an ERL roster. Then you have Heretics. I mean, that was an absolute joke when it began. It was just Yankos versus the world plus the odd game of Jack Spectre. Meanwhile, Ebby and Ruby are 2 of the worst fucking solo laners probably to ever play in LEC. Especially imports. It can fuck right off. Astralis was even a bit whack. They had Dehor instead of Leader to begin the split, if people remember. Yeah, like, what are you working with? SK actually had a pretty good split, remember? This is one where they came like top 4. They had a nice little run. This is where they were popping off. Their bot lane looked good. That was the first split. Then we'll go to the spring split, shall we? What happened in spring? What even changed? You get leader in, so now they're a decent team in Stralis, but they're only ever going to be a coin flip / an upset team. Excel, in theory, they have Abadagi waiting, and Limit comes in, but still garbage. Look, he's still last place. Heretics hasn't got Invetio yet, so they're second to last. Mad Lions, by the way, wins this split, but they're right down here in the BO1s. BDS actually activates and goes ham. Astralis had a very good split. G2's still good. This is where Vitality was awesome. They finished third in this split overall, right? They had an upset. This is where everything looked like it was starting to go, but then the playoffs, it all fell apart. SK Gaming's got worse. Fnatic slightly better, but this is a different roster. This is obviously where they still got Reckless, but they got Advien. They kicked out Rooks at this point in time. They got Askaran in, and Wonder was self-benched or whatever. The team improves a little bit and becomes all right. But still, what mega rosters am I looking at here? Like Koi, still got Trimby. It's basically the only one I can be hyped about realistically. It's just the Vitality one, right? And that did get better, but still wasn't that awesome. So then let's go to the last split. Oh, bloody hell, the summer split. What's going on here? Right, Astralis has still got the solid lineup, but now just as a team, they've fallen off. They're that good. Excel's brought in Peach and Abadagi and Limit's full-time, but who gives a fuck? I mean, they actually did end up being solid, but they don't look like they should be able to play G2. Fnatic now has got Noah, who ended up being really good, and Trimby, and actually looked like a phenomenon when they were in this part of the tournament. Looked like really good, but they've obviously got some rookies, and they haven't played together as lineup, so in the playoffs, will they hold up? Spoiler, they don't. You have Koi has got Advien in now instead of Trimby because for whatever reason, the Koi GM just hates fucking winning for some reason. Who knows why that is. Vitality this time brings in Douglas as the jungler because they had some issues with Bo after a certain point in time. It doesn't work. It's even worse than before. Herex improves a bit, but they used to be a whatever team. So getting in Vethio and Yankos, that's all right, but it'll be that good. BDS gets worse. SK just stays irrelevant. Mad Lions goes terribly after the first 5 wins. They lose all the games. I think it was, no, they won 4 games and lost 5. What do you expect? All these rosters suck. These are fucking dog shit. There's only G2's is good. Vitality's on paper supposed to be good and apparently won loads of the scrims. Fnatic's not bad, but they're super inexperienced and don't have the playtime together. And Mad Lions is just a mad up and down team that their coaches staff apparently do not grill them and push them hard. And then they just turn up when they have to, really. So they didn't really have to at this point in time. And there's another thing. Just look at the talent as well. Look how spread out the talent is. So if you ask me who were some of the best players, right? In the first split, Cobby was really good. He was way better than Reckless, but he's not on Reckless' team, not on a Fnatic where you can do something. You go elsewhere, you go and look at Kozel Yoya didn't end up getting the signing to G2. He's still on Mad Lions, one of the best players in the entire league. On SK Gaming, Marcoon probably shouldn't even be there. Irrelevant ends up being probably better than he should be. Exakick again, a player I heard a bunch of teams looking, but he's stuck on SK. They had become an irrelevant team eventually. BDS, Crowney could be in the best team in the league. He's probably the best ADC in the entire LEC, aside from potentially Upset, but he's on BDS, so there's another team that should be mid-table, but he's helping push them higher up. Heretics should quite frankly not even be a playoff team. It should be 9th or 8th best team, but having Yankos and Vet, they all do a lot for you, so that's pushed them up. So you go and look, in an ideal world, wouldn't we take all these players, just chuck them in the same pool and make a bunch of different lineups? If I stop right now, look, I'll do it right now. We'll leave G2 as is. We're not going to fuck with G2. But let's say Koi just gets their fucking head in the game. And then let's say instead of Shigenda, they'd signed Irrelevant. So what a really good weak side player who is the odd pocket pick carry. So let's say they'd signed Irrelevant instead. And then obviously Malrang was never going to fucking last forever, was he? So let's say they'd signed a jungler. Could it have been Yankos? I heard he is cheap. Could it have been Marcoon? Let's say they signed Yankos. So let's say they now have Irrelevant, Yankos, Larson, Comp, and they used to have Trimby, right? We're cooking with gas. That's a team that can win a split right now. Then let's go to Vitality. The main problem with Vitality is a mixture of rookies and languages, right? So we're going to have to take out one of Bo or Photon. So let's say we take out Bo and Yankos goes there, or Elyoya goes there. Wasn't that a banger signing? Let's say we keep Bo though, because he was the big talent, right? Let's say they sign Odoam there, or they sign Irrelevant. All these lineups, I'm just making them instantly better. I'm just making them already good. I mean, the XL one already, they could, in this first split, that could have been Yankos instead of Odoam there. Not Odoam there. Instead of Cersei, they could have had him, who is a good jungler, but his style obviously didn't fit the team, did he? And I've also heard, based on the other ones, maybe instead of Targamas, he just did a different player there because he needed someone like a bit feisty. The joke is actually if he'd kept Mickey X in a dream, but they couldn't, unfortunately. So I think it's the talent. The talent's spread out too much. Most of the big rosters failed, the big contenders. So as a result, people like BDS and Mad and XL eventually with a reworked roster are just foisted into contendership. G2 just Bing chills on the same lineup that's way too good anyway and could have been even more insane. Like, this isn't the format, guys. Like, run this year back, as I hope they will next year, but with a better set of GM teams. It'll be an amazing format. Way better than the BO1s into the BO5, like the old LEC format we had. For many years of my career in esports, it really was just me. I did it all. I was the one person driving myself forwards. I didn't have people around me to help me. But actually, one thing I've learned over the years is the value of a support network. And mine is, of course, the Skrilluminati, my Patreon community. So this video, like many on my channel, was made possible by Ahmed Hadjou, Frisky, Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Animosity, Bot Pounder 420, Jensen Goh, Tobias Bernasconi, Tosh, Torin, and as always, you know it, a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Do you want to ask a question for my regular AMA? Do you want to find out teasers? Who are the guests for the upcoming interviews I often do? Maybe you want to be part of those long discussions where we can talk about whatever you want in esports. Well, if any of those tickle your fancy, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today. Support my content via the Patreon link in the description box below.